Hello, everyone. I'm Cass.
And I'm Ben.
Welcome to our podcast called Intellectually Speaking. Today we are going to be tackling the topic of multiverse theories. But before we get into that, just a little bit about ourselves. I'm a registered nurse. I graduated about a year ago. I now work full-time on a mental health unit. I absolutely love my job. And on the side, I do a little bit of a fitness business as a coach with Beachbody. Super excited to be starting that. And on to Ben.
I am a nerd in training in that I study math, doing a PhD in it, and hopefully that contributes something to our discussions. And beyond that, I'm just interested in stuff and like talking. So,
The biggest nerd.
yeah, I am.
Okay, so our podcasts, they're just going to be about quite a few different things, not just this sciencey stuff that we're tackling today, but we will be talking about more science things, a lot of space science as well, very interesting stuff we find, some conspiracy theories and true crime, yeah, so kind of like a well-rounded podcast about things that we find interesting that we can have a discussion about. So I guess we will jump right in. So I thought a really good place to start with the multiverse theory would be the Big Bang Theory. As you know, it's not just like that popular comedy show that everyone likes to watch. It's also the theory of how the universe began. And it is actually the leading theory and explanation for the beginning of the universe as we know it. So at its simplest, the universe started as a singularity, and this singularity suddenly started to inflate. That's the Big Bang. And over time, electrons were moving about, and they became atoms. About 380,000 years later, they were able to carry light. The first light. So this was actually once the heat from the Big Bang cooled down enough for light to be produced, which is kind of interesting. I always thought it would have been heat produced the light, but in this case, once it cooled down enough, that's when light was first produced. Did you know that, Ben?
I know virtually no physics. All my contributions are going to be math related.
So, I'm not saying that I'm a physicist in any sense. I just find this stuff very interesting, and so when I'm doing research about it, I find these little tidbits, and I knew about the Big Bang Theory in school, but I never knew that it could be too hot for there to be light, which I found very interesting. So basically, our universe, it just started to grow and expand, and everything was moving around and bumping into each other, creating all these different things, these stars, these planets, these meteors, everything. And basically, 13.82 billion years later, the universe as we know it today. So, with multiverse theories, quick question. If there's more than one universe, do you think it's possible that they began in a different way? Do you think maybe they experienced something other than the Big Bang?
Well, that's tricky. I mean, I think the Big Bang makes a few assumptions. I mean, okay, doesn't make assumptions, but I mean, there's bound to be some initial conditions that need to be specified. There's got to be some physical laws and some physical constants. Otherwise, how can we extrapolate anything from the idea, okay, like the particles move around in some way, we need to specify how they move about and how they interact and where they were to start at the beginning of the Big Bang. So I think there are multiple different versions that may be almost identical to the Big Bang, just with different initial conditions or physical laws or physical constants, and they result in wildly different universes.
Yeah, I completely agree. Probably wouldn't have explained it the same way, but I completely agree with everything you said. And it kind of goes into my next question that I have, which is maybe not really questions, but more kind of something to think about. Maybe other universes didn't experience the same triggers that triggered this quote-unquote bang that we had. So maybe these other universes are still stuck in singularity, or maybe they experience them at different times. So each universe could really be at a different age because they didn't experience the same trigger of whatever the trigger was of the Big Bang at the same time.
So, are we going to consider that all the universes sort of started at some same point in time, and then at different points in time in the future, they expanded outwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to fathom that if there are multiple different universes, that they didn't all initially start in the exact same place. But I guess it's really hard because it's a question of like space, like physical space, but it's also a question of time, and it could really differ in quite a bit of different ways. So there's my dog Penny. You'll probably see her later. She's just barking at the cats. But anyway, I think we could kind of move into a little bit of definitions here when it comes to the multiverse and universe and parallel universes. These are all terms that people tend to use without really fully understanding what it means, or they're using it in a way that could be different. Like they're words that you can use in different ways, and you're not necessarily using them wrong, but just to define it so that we know what we're talking about during this podcast. So a lot of people use the term parallel universe, and when it comes to that, I think a lot of people mean the multiverse theories, because there are different types of multiverses, there are different theories of multiverses, and parallel universe is a theory, like a sub-theory from the multiverse theories. So that's the first thing I wanted to kind of define and put a parameter on, is parallel universe theory kind of falls underneath the multiverse theory. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the universe. Because when people talk about the universe, it's really hard to define because it seems so infinite, and we don't really know where it starts and ends, or if it starts and ends. That's the big question. So it's really hard to define it as one simple thing. So it could mean, like this bubble that we live in, or it could mean what we can observe. So we could have our kind of like observable universe here, in one spot in space-time, and we could have another universe that is way outside of our observable universe that we could never get to, but it's still kind of in the same space-time area. So it's different universes. It's for each different theory, what I'm trying to get at is it means a different thing. Universe means a different thing in every single theory that we're going to talk about.
It's a tricky thing. I mean, and I feel like over the course of this, we're going to have to say, okay, well, by universe, we might mean observable universe.
Exactly.
But, and then the whole theory of the multiverse, in a sort of similar vein, is not really empirically provable, which is why a lot of scientists are opposed to the idea, this notion of a multiverse is, well, if you can't observe something, well, then how can you prove or disprove it? It's one of these undecidable questions. Is there some other universe beyond the cosmological horizon, or are we just wildly speculating like non-scientists here?
Yeah, and I mean, it's also, it's exactly that, and we don't really know if in other universes they're more ahead in technology and science. Maybe they know how to travel from different universes and like different areas, and we just don't know how, or maybe none of us have reached it yet. There's a lot of unknowns here, and we really can't prove any of it, so it's just kind of a big question mark in the end. It's just more of a fun to think about kind of a thing, I think.
I mean, just because something isn't provable doesn't mean that you can't argue for it. You don't need to prove with definite certainty that something is true. We can give some probabilistic arguments. We're amateurs here. I study math. Cass studied nursing. Neither of us are physicists, but we will do our best. We'll try to be educated humans, and give some sort of rational argument for our positions.
Yeah. So, like I said before, there's quite a few different, or there's, the parallel universe is like a subtopic from the multiverse theory. So there are other subtopics that we're going to talk about today. Penny's getting really angry at those cats right now. Anyway, so I'm sure there's more out there than what I'm going to mention, and I'm sure that we could, research this for years and years and years and never come close to understanding in full depth even one of the theories that we're going to talk about. But we're going to talk about the bubble universes theory, mathematical universes theory, daughter universes theory, which is my personal favorite, and Tegmark's level of universes, which I think is Ben's favorite.
It is.
I like that one too, actually, but I do, my favorite is the daughter universes, and that's more on the philosophical side of it, is why I like the daughter universes. But we're going to start with the more popular, I think, the more popular theory, which is parallel universes. So the quickest and easiest way to explain this theory is that you think about it kind of like a loaf of bread, and each slice of bread is a theory is a universe, in and of itself. So each slice of bread is a theory, but this bread, the entire bread, is made up of an infinite number or an infinite type of particles. And so each loaf of bread could differ by one particle, or it could differ by every single particle could be in a different position. So there could be an infinite number of arrangements of the particles, but there are a finite number of particles because we only have that one number. So,
well, I mean, assuming that there are finitely many particles.
Exactly.
And are we assuming that the space that the particles occupy is finite as well?
I think in this theory, yes, it is finite. So this theory kind of explains, in this loaf of bread, you have an arrangement of particles, and that is where we are. That is our universe as we know it. The arrangement of particles is one certain way. In the next loaf of bread, it could be almost the exact same as the first loaf or the first slice of bread, except one particle is in a different spot. Or the next slice of bread could be every single particle is in a different spot. So there's an infinite number of arrangements, but because there's a finite number of particles, eventually these universes would start repeating themselves. There's kind of like an infinite number of universes, but eventually these universes kind of repeat themselves in the same arrangements. So out there would be another universe that is exactly like our own. And that's the biggest difference,
okay,
I think, from parallel universes and the other theories, is that there are other universes out there that are exactly like this one that we know right now, because there would have to be this repetition.
Okay. Initially I would have said that I thought that the parallel universes theory you were describing would actually could be consistent with the Tegmark one, but I suppose there probably wouldn't, or would there be? Maybe there would be repetition in the Tegmark classification scheme, but we'll get to that one. I was sitting here wondering when you would switch over from loaves to slices. But yeah, so we've got finitely many particles and a finite space that they occupy, but we've got infinitely many universes. I think I would guess that if we have finite particles and finite space, then even though it would be extremely large, there should still be finitely many possible arrangements of those particles within that space. Mm-hmm. Just because, we've got two finite things that we're dealing with. So, and that's what allows the repetition within some infinite loaf of bread. It's extremely long, and that corresponds to these different dimensions.
Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to get at, is it would eventually repeat itself even though it seems infinite, because there's so many particles, so many different kinds of particles, and so many possible arrangements. But really, in the end, it will repeat itself, and we will come across other universes that are exactly like ours, and other universes that are exactly like the universe that's our neighbors. But in this theory, you can't travel between the universes. You've got your slice in time and space, and it's got its slice in time and space, and there's no traveling in between. I also do find a lot of these theories you can kind of tuck them into Tegmark's level of universes, which is why I wanted to put it last, so that once it kind of, I feel like it'll come into like a big story of, well, that kind of falls under here, and this kind of falls under this. I think Tegmark really does a great job at explaining all the theories kind of within one.
Yeah, it's very comprehensive. I mean, that's why it's a classification scheme. There's a bunch of different levels to it that kind of incorporate all these different theories.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next universe theory, multiverse theory, that I would like to talk about is the bubble universe theory. And this one is the biggest reason why I wanted to mention the Big Bang, is because this one involves this inflation that we experience with the Big Bang. That inflation that was the Big Bang, but when the Big Bang happened, we have continued to expand. And I do remember reading that first light that I talked about, scientists have been able to observe it kind of at the outer edges of our universe, whatever that may be, whatever that may be defined as. They have been able to observe the first light. So that gives them evidence that says our universe is continually expanding. So maybe we do have a finite universe, but it keeps growing in every direction. And so this bubble universe theory is that, say we've got like this huge kind of space-time area, and we've got our expanding universe within this area, and then, light years away from our universe and where it's expanding, there's another bubble. Maybe this bubble is smaller than our bubble, and maybe it's bigger than our bubble, but it's also expanding, and it is a completely separate universe. And the reason I like this theory is because the laws of physics and particle arrangements and atoms and what they are can be completely different within each different universe, because it is like we can't even begin to imagine what is in these other bubbles. And this is also one where they like to talk a lot about space travel and aliens, because aliens could possibly be a part of these other universes, and maybe they have the technology to come and visit us, but we don't have the technology to go and visit them, and that's why we haven't seen them yet. And like I said, the laws of physics could be different within each bubble, so maybe they have the technology to leave their universe, but they don't have the technology to get into ours because they don't know our laws of physics yet. So it really leaves a lot of possibility within this theory.
I mean, we also have to consider how many of these universes, what is the probability that they would be conducive to life? Because, I mean, the odds that, like, our current universe, there's a really, like, crazy convergence of factors that were necessary to make this universe conducive to the development of even matter, own life. We needed certain physical constants, certain physical laws, all these things. But, I mean, given an infinity of universes, there will be infinitely many universes which can sustain life.
Yeah.
And who knows what their levels of technological advancement of this life in these different universes could be.
Yeah, and we keep kind of just assuming that to have life, we need to have these certain laws of physics, and that to be alive means a certain thing, to us, and that it should mean a certain thing to every other being in every other universe. But it is possible that life is something, maybe they're conscious and maybe they're moving and stuff like that, but maybe they don't require the same things that we do that checks off our lists of life. So I really like this, because the laws that we know that say that we can survive and we can live could be completely different in the next universe over. Come here, Penny. Come here and stop barking.
That's a tricky thing, this idea of laws and formal systems. I mean, a different place can have different laws, and defining life, even within our own universe, is tricky. I mean, AI, would you consider like an uploaded human to be conscious? Would you consider infinitely many copies of a person to be identical? Or how do you define life, consciousness? I mean, we're definitely drifting off there. It's into probably another topic.
Yeah, well, exactly. But that's why I like this theory, because it really kind of opens your mind to, like, what does it really mean to be alive? Could it mean something different to other beings? Is it possible that these other beings cannot travel here because they cannot live in our environment, yet we can live in our environment? There's a lot of, like, open-ended questions there that we may never have answers to, but are really interesting to think about.
Yeah. No, I am still super looking forward to the Tegmark classification scheme, because then we get all into the rules. That exactly what we're talking about here.
Okay, so next up on my list, I do have the mathematical universes. Do you want to take it away, or would you rather cover that under Tegmarks?
I feel like that's part of Tegmarks. So
that's what I'm saying. I do think a lot of them actually do fall under Tegmarks levels. But we can skip it, because I do think that one really does fall really well under Tegmarks. Like, it's almost exactly one of the levels.
Yeah, it's the final level.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say. It's the final level. So, so that we're not too repetitive here, let's just skip it, and we'll just remind everyone later that it is also the mathematical universes theory. Okay, so the last one before Tegmarks is the daughter universes, and this is my personal ultimate favorite out of all of them. And it's really, like, for lack of a better word, trippy to think about. Like, it's one of those ones that people like to talk about, and it's the one where every choice and decision is different in every universe. So every time there's a choice or there's a decision that's been made, it branches off into another branch. It creates, like, a branch of multiple universes. Kind of like the butterfly effect, but except every time it literally, instead of it literally branches away from each other and creates a separate universe. And then in this one, you cannot travel between universes at all. You're not supposed to be able to. But it's really interesting to me to think out there, maybe, younger me decided to actually stick with the physics class and go be a doctor. Maybe I'm in, med school right now rather than full-time mental health registered nurse. Like, it's really cool to think that there are other versions of me out there that made different decisions in my lifetime. And it's really trippy to think about, because not only is it my decisions that would create this branch, but it's everyone else's decisions and every other, like, animal's decisions, or, like, every little thing creates a separate branch. So there's infinite number of branches and infinite number of possibilities, but kind of along the same, like, timeline.
We're not limiting ourselves just to choices and decisions by conscious beings, though, are we?
No.
I mean, just any kind of physical, observable, anything where there are multiple possible outcomes that could occur. That's where these branch points exist.
Exactly. Right. So I was reading that it's the laws of quantum mechanics create each branch, and it's like every possible possibility happens, but on a separate universe, and that's where it splits and it creates a new one. So it's like every single second there are an infinite number of branches that are created of parallel universes, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger every single second, and it's really cool to think about.
Yeah, and it is level 3 of Tegmark's classification scheme.
Exactly, so this one falls underneath it as well, and I love that one. I find myself just kind of sitting around thinking, like, what could another me be doing right now? Or there's a universe that doesn't have me in it, so, like, what is that universe like, And
it's tragic to think about, isn't it?
It is.
Universe without you, a universe where you are not a mental health professional. That's not a universe I want to live in.
It's interesting too, because like it started at the very beginning, wherever the beginning was, and again, we don't really know that. So there are universes where maybe, you know, like planet Earth was never created. Maybe all of living beings are again something completely different from our laws of physics and our laws of life. Maybe it's totally different, yet we're still along the same timeline. So it's really not that far away. Exactly.
Now I'm disappointed. Now I actually want. Why don't I have 8 arms?
Well, I'm sure 8-armed Ben is wishing that he only had 2 arms right now.
The rest of what was greener.
Alright, so I'm going to let you take it away with Tegmark's levels of multiverse.
Okay, so I am not very well prepared for this. And disclaimer, of course, we both got our drinks. Mine is my drink of choice, which is a rum and coke. Cass's, yours is?
Mine is a Heineken, a beer.
Classic.
I started with a Hoegaarden, which is also beer. But I drank that too fast, so...
So my vague recollection of Tegmark's classification scheme is he theorizes these different levels of possible multiverse theories. And I want to say that his belief is that they're all true. The first level of this is different initial conditions. So these many different universes exist in different volumes, which are far enough away from each other so as to be not observable within one universe to the other. You can't see the other ones. And they all have different initial conditions, so they all look different. But they've all got the same physical constants, they've all got the same physical laws, but there's infinitely many of them because there's infinitely many possible initial conditions. Actually, wait, no, there should be finitely many, given finite space and finite particles. Anyways, I'm not a physicist, but clearly.
Mathematically, there should be a finite number.
I believe it's reasonable to assume that it's finite.
Yeah, I think you've touched on everything that I took notes on for level 1. So I think the biggest thing to take away from this is that we've got an infinite number of universes. They all have the same laws of physics, but they all started out a little different. So it's hard to kind of understand what they might look like. They could look completely different than ours. So
I believe what they're named is Hubble volumes. I don't know what that's in reference to. I know we have a Hubble telescope. We telescope to observe things. Maybe it means that these are universes which are not observable across this vast distance between them. That seems to make sense, and I'm going to go with it.
Okay, so my biggest question, though, when we say, you know, our observable universe, and then outside of it is, you know, a separate universe because we can't observe it, what happens if eventually we do gain the technology to travel that far? Does that become our universe, or is it still a separate universe?
How do you define observable? That actually is tricky. I mean, I guess I would define it by, if only light had a finite range that it could travel, then we could say, okay, like, it's clearly not observable. Light can't make it that far.
Or light cannot be carried there. Like when, before, or just like at the beginning of the Big Bang, for the first 380,000 years, light couldn't even be carried because it was just free electrons. They weren't atoms yet. They could not carry the light. There were no photons. Right? So...
You know what an atom and an electron is.
Photons carry light, from what I remember, and this is like digging into my high school memories, so it's iffy, but but that's, again, going back to the Big Bang and how we're continuing to expand and how there is that first light. And so as we expand, light is reaching further and further. So like I said, does that not, like, add to our universe? And can we observe further and further? Or is it just, like, it's really hard to define. And, like, when does it start and stop? You know, like, because if we can't observe it now, but what if we can observe it later? Like, does that become our universe because we can suddenly observe it? Or... did we actually travel to an alternate universe because we couldn't observe it before.
I feel like a really formal definition of universe would be great.
It would be, but there is none because we don't really know what a universe is because we haven't observed more than one of them.
Yeah.
Since we only know our universe, we can't really define what another universe might look like because we only know the one. And we don't even know where it starts and ends, so we can't even define our own universe, so how are we supposed to start defining these other ones, too?
I mean, on the bright side, we can see all of this first light that you described, and if we could, honestly, I can't think of the word, the inverse word of extrapolate, but if we could take all our observations of this first light, bring it back, we could compute the initial conditions of our universe.
And that's what, from what I was reading, they were kind of doing, like, when they were studying this light, there was another word for it, I can't remember. It wasn't really the first light, but that's how I'm remembering it as. There was another word for it, but they were able to kind of understand and make it a little bit more concrete that the Big Bang was, I mean, it's not concrete, it's a theory. But they were able to kind of look at this and be like, well, this does still kind of lean us more towards the Big Bang because this goes along with the theory. This light and the expansion of the universe and the expansion of this light. So basically, our universe was like, I don't want to say us, but like the oldest part of our universe, that was the center, that was the singularity, and it's expanding outwards. But not just like in a circle, but three-dimensionally. It would be 3 dimensions, right? Expanding outward. It's so much to think about, and that's why I love it, is, you know, I don't really need a physics degree to sit here and just ponder.
And, I mean, this theory is so inherently non-verifiable. Yeah. Which is what makes it fun. You really don't need a physics degree to just think about it and, you know, apply your own reasoning to decide whether you think it's reasonable or not.
Yeah.
Should we move on to the next level of the
yes, we
classification scheme? Okay. Again, just from memory, I believe the second level of this classification scheme. So we dealt with the first one that had to do with initial conditions. I believe the second one had to do with the physical constants. So physical constants, maybe physical laws, pretty sure it's constants. And in the same way that we have some wide range of possible initial conditions, again, we have some wide range of possible physical constants. And then we assume that all of these are realizable and they all exist in some infinite space.
So,
am I right?
What I wrote is that these multiverses exist within the same space-time as our own. However, they are completely separate. So it's kind of like the bubble theory that I talked about, where the laws of physics could be different in each separate one, but they're still kind of in our same space-time. Did that make sense with what you said?
I do not know enough physics.
Okay, I have to pee, so we're gonna take a pause here. Okay, I'm back. So I thought right now would actually be a really great time to mention, firstly, my cousin, Kaylee. So she made our intro music, and I think it's absolutely amazing. She's pretty young, so what she can do on the guitar is, like, it's crazy. You know, I tried to play guitar, and I can't do that stuff, so, she's amazing, and I love her, and we love our intro music, so thank you, Kaylee, for doing that for us.
Thanks, Kaylee.
And so secondly, I'd like to thank Keenan. He is a friend of the family, a friend of mine, and he created our logo, words. He created our logo, and I gave him like a very, very vague idea of I want it to be cute and kind of funny looking, and I want it to have glasses. And he came up with like this, it's exactly what I wanted. And so again, very talented. He's also like high school age, so I think like, these skills are amazing. Again, I have tried to use the program that he uses, and I can't even come close to that. So, great job, Keenan. I love it, and thank you so much.
You're the best, Keenan.
All right, so just to jump right back in, we were on level 3 of Tegmark's levels of Multiverse. Ben, take it away. Level 3.
So this is definitely my weaker area. The way I see it is it's this daughter universe's. It's more of a quantum mechanics area that I'm kind of on, but my vague understanding of it is that at any point where there's some observable, there's a branch point, and so at this part kind of incorporates both level 1 and 2 of this classification scheme, in that there's all possible initial conditions, there's all possible physical constants, but now we're also considering all possible branch points, which I believe might correspond to all possible sets of physical laws. But I will let the person who likes this.
Yeah, so again, this is exactly like the daughter's universe's theory that I really like. So again, it's basically each tick in time creates an infinite new number of branches of universes. And it can be so infinite, like, it's just, you can't even imagine the possibilities. So, yeah, I don't really have much to add. It's about the laws of quantum mechanics, which I don't fully understand, because again, I'm not a physicist or anything, just to have an interest in this stuff. But every time I read about it, quantum mechanics were mentioned, so I figured it was probably a good thing to mention here. But yeah, let's skip to level 4, because we've already we've talked about level 3 already in the daughter universes. Level 4, this is Ben's favorite. I'm gonna let him nerd out for a little while here.
Okay, so yeah, level 3, I mean, find a book that has quantum mechanics in its title, read it. Maybe you will develop a better understanding of it than me. Level 4 is kind of the thing that encompasses everything. So all these other schemes, they're all a subset of this fourth level, which says pretty much any universe which can be, you know what, I'm going to go to the exact definition here, because otherwise I will blow it, is all universes which can be described by different mathematical structures.
Okay, before you, I just want to intervene here and just say that we do have our references in the link in the description, all of them. So if you want to check out what we're looking at and see where we got our information from, it is there. You can continue, Ben.
Wikipedia is your friend. It really is, though. I mean, when I'm doing any kind of research, Wikipedia is my go-to resource, despite what people say. So yeah, I mean, anything which can be described by a set of mathematical structures, which sounds kind of vague, but really what you're talking about there is a formal system, something which has an alphabet and some rules of inference. Okay, I'm getting into something a little boring, but generally, take math. It's built on a foundation called set theory. Or, I mean, that's one possible foundation of math. And it involves some set of assumptions called axioms, and then you take these assumptions and you extrapolate from them. And you end up building all of math. And in the same way, you could take some set of assumptions and then extrapolate a universe from that. And that you could have different sets of rules, and the idea here is anything which is describable as some sort of system with various physical constants, various initial conditions, various physical laws, anything which can be described in some mathematical way constitutes some one of these infinitely many possible universes.
Can I try to explain this in layman's terms?
Yes, because
okay.
I can't.
So I think I'm this is how I'm understanding it as someone who has like basically zero physics and zero math education and background. Okay, so I'm understanding it as basically this is any kind of possibility that we could fathom or think of, as long as we could explain it in some way with math.
Essentially. Now, there is one kind of sticking point here, which is this fourth level only deals with things which are computable.
Okay.
So by computable, I mean you could like write some kind of computer program which outputs this universe in some finite way.
So does this kind of go into like simulation theory a little bit?
Not really. And this is okay. I'm going to go ahead and disclaimer here. There are many people that I know that are so much more qualified to discuss this than me. My set theory is extremely weak, and I know many people who are in set theory or, honestly, any other discipline who would be much better able to describe this than I am. So I'm going to approach this from a purely probabilistic standpoint.
Okay.
If you don't mind me going off on a bit of a tangent.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So my tangent is I'm going to argue for why I believe in multiverse theory. So Cass, first of all, Occam's razor, is that a thing that you're familiar with or no? Okay.
It
so
sounds familiar, but no, I don't remember what
so
it is.
Occam's razor is this idea that essentially the simplest solution is usually right.
Okay, yeah. Now, that rings a bell.
It intuitively makes sense. So, if we're dealing with something unverifiable, something like the multiverse theory, where there's no way of proving or disproving it, we're looking more at probabilistic arguments. We're trying to say, oh, well, what's more likely? Probably the simplest thing. We'll assume the simplest thing if we have no means of deciding between two things. The tricky thing is the universe is really complicated. There's a bunch of initial conditions, physical constants, yada, yada, yada. I've gone on about that. But there's a lot involved. So is it simpler to assume all of these crazy things that have somehow converged to make this universe conducive to life, or is it simpler to assume that all possible universes exist and we just happen to be in one that is conducive to life? I happen to believe that is the more likely possibility. This is where people disagree on the application of Occam's razor. Some would be like, oh, no. One universe is simpler. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, well, I'm more looking at and it's called the sort of information content.
But there are so many other options there. What if something else is similar that aren't those two options? What if it's just similar to believe that there are other universes, simpler to believe that there are other universes out there that also are conducive to life?
I do believe that. I believe there are infinitely many universes, and probably infinitely many that are conducive to life.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, I think that too. I think it's just more probable, and therefore more simple, to think that there are other universes and they also are conducive to life. Like, I just don't think it's very probable that we're the only one.
And I mean, if you go to our references, you read the Wikipedia page, I think there's a little blurb on Kolmogorov complexity, which explains in a kind of simple way, okay, what do you consider more complicated? The number 5,736,921 or all integers? What's more complicated? What's more difficult to remember? It's definitely the number, whereas you could compute all integers by just saying, oh, start at number 0, plus or minus 1, add infinitum. My words are failing me. But it's a matter of what's more complicated.
Yeah.
Like describing a bunch of initial stuff, or having some program that can generate everything that's possible, even though everything that's possible is going to be extremely large.
Okay. I feel every time I look at level 4 or the mathematics universe theory, I feel like I understand it a little bit more, but I also feel like I don't understand it at all. And I mean, that's just kind of the way a lot of life is, though. Like, a lot of things that you learn in life, the more you learn about it, the more you realize you really don't know anything at all about it, and that there's so much to know. So, I think your description has helped. Do I think I could go and explain the mathematical universe to someone else? Yeah, I'm not there yet.
I think I need someone to explain it to me.
Yeah, it would maybe down the road when our podcast gains a little momentum, we could get a little guest speaker on one of your faculty members or something.
Yeah, no, I definitely need a real set theorist to explain to me. My buddy George. He would understand all of this a lot better than I do.
But could he put it in layman's terms? We would have to sit there and be like, okay, but what about this? You know? But I think that would be fun, especially over a few drinks. It's always fun to sit there with like a purely mathematical person and then, you know, kind of question the philosophical side of things. It ends up in some interesting conversations a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And like that's why we end up staying awake and sometimes until 6 a.m. just talking about these topics, because I'm like, but wait, philosophical side, because I can philosophize without having a philosophy degree, but I can't understand the mathematical side without having a mathematical degree. So I mean, that's where we have a lot of our conversation. And you are very like math, science, laws. And while I'm a very sciencey person, I still have that kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I have like more of a spiritual kind of question about the universe still there.
Which is definitely a reasonable inquiry.
No, I think both sides are very interesting to have in this conversation. And I think that's why we end up staying up so late discussing it, because we're not just like, oh yeah, I agree. You know, but we're kind of like, wait, we believe in like these other things that don't always kind of line up. But not necessarily that they're like butting heads. We're not butting heads about it, but it's kind of like, but this doesn't make sense because we believe in this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you definitely can't have a conversation in an echo chamber.
Exactly. Okay, alright, so it feels like we've kind of gotten a little off topic here when it comes to the multiverse theory, so I'm going to bring us a little back on track, but I'm going to kind of bring in a little bit of I want to say conspiracy theory, but it's really out there. It's not like I have any facts or anything to give you about this, but it does bring in the parallel universe theory, so it's interesting, and I'm going to say right off the bat, I do not believe in this. Okay, I think it's absolute bullshit.
Hogwash.
Hogwash. There's a good word. And I think but a lot of people do. A lot of people, you know, they get hung up in this theory. And I think part of it is that it's likable, you know, to think this way. But I mean, maybe I'm just in the right universe and you'll see what I mean by that. But basically, this one, typically people talk about parallel universes, but it could really go with a lot. I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast. I'm going to slow down. I think it could go with a lot of the theories that we have discussed today, not just the parallel universe theory. So I think this is one of those cases where people say parallel universe, but really just mean multiverse in general.
Just channel Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. Chill. I'm in the zone. My voice is going deeper. No. Okay, so
They're gonna start plugging Visa all of a sudden.
So this theory involves the idea that basically two universes kind of collided and they shifted, and maybe you stayed in your universe, or maybe you are now in an alternate universe, but things are almost exactly the same. One of those theories where, like, this would be kind of like the daughter universes or the parallel universes theory. Things are almost the same in these theories that have in these universes that have collided, except, you know, you yourself ended up in the opposite universe as you started in when these two universes collided. When this happened, small things changed. So, Ben, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
And I'm going to see if you're in the right universe or not. In your...
I already have a movie to recommend to you, but go on.
Okay, well, no, tell me the movie recommendation, because I'm sure a lot of our viewers would appreciate the movie recommendation as well.
It's called Coherence, and I think that it is going to be a movie that is exactly along the lines of what you're describing, where there are these universes that somehow, I guess, collide or overlap, and there's a way that people can traverse this distance between them, and suddenly they find themselves in something that's a little different.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. Low budget, but really good.
Okay, alright, I'll watch it. Okay, so my questions. Do you remember how the word Berenstain in Berenstain Bears was spelled? How is it spelled?
I have never seen that show, but I'm going to guess that it's Berenstein.
See, that's what a lot of people think. And a lot of people who have watched the shows and read the books in their childhood think that. And, you know, I will admit that I did think it was EIN. But it is, in fact, AIN. So that would make it seem like you're possibly in the other universe.
To be fair,
Yeah.
Well, I've never heard of them, so...
Okay, I have more questions for you.
Okay.
How did Nelson Mandela died?
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela. How did he die?
Okay, so after apartheid, he became the president of South Africa. Honestly, I have no memory of how he died. I would guess old age.
Okay.
I mean...
You got that right. It's old age. A lot of people, they get his story confused with someone else's story, and I can't remember whose story, but he was shot in prison, is what a lot of people remember.
Shot in prison? He was in prison.
He was in prison, but everyone thinks that he died in prison at a young age. He actually, like, relatively recently passed away of old age. So everyone was kind of like, what? I thought he was dead. That's a really
strange thing to believe. I can't believe anybody... I mean, there's been multiple movies about his life after prison.
Here's another really popular one. Yeah, I mean... I think...
Invictus! It's got Matt Damon in it!
So I can explain all of these away after. Like, scientifically, I can explain these away. I'm just having fun with the theory for right now.
Okay. No, it is fun.
It's fun, and I like it. I like it because it's fun and it's light, and I don't believe it, but it's fun. So this is the biggest one for me. So, hang on. What is the famous Star Wars line?
The famous Star Wars line?
When people are quoting the movie, what are they quoting?
Jeez. Well, there's so many options. I'm torn between two. I guess either May the Force be with you,
okay,
or
not that one.
I am your father.
Luke, I am your father. Yep, that's the one. It's quoted all the time. That is not what they say in the movie.
It's Luke.
Nope.
No, I am your father.
There is no Luke. It's just, no, I am your father.
There's not even Luke.
There's no Luke.
Geez.
There's zero Luke. And everyone thinks that there is.
I feel terrible about it because now that I'm replaying the scene in my head, I'm like, there's no Luke. What was I thinking?
Obviously, because he's like my father died. And he's like, no, I am your father, you know?
It
makes no sense for him to say Luke.
Yeah. And this is like the final line of, I want to say Bohemian Rhapsody. One of the Queen songs, there's a final...
Yeah, exactly. This is another
We are the champions.
Yes.
We are the champions.
Yeah, because everyone thinks it ends of the world, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So that's another Mandela Effect. So,
okay.
But I want to talk about the Star Wars one for a little bit, because that one has it hits close to home with me, because I grew up, my dad is like the biggest Star Wars fan that I know in the whole universe. Okay, and I like Star Wars now, but when I was a kid, when I was growing up, I didn't like it, but my dad loved it. So, I mean, I remember him talking about it. And then I also had a little cousin, and he was like 2 years old, and he would walk around with his Star Wars helmet on, his Darth Vader helmet on, and he'd go around going like, dun, 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 dun. So, like, I had family that, like, loved Star Wars. And, again, my dad being the number one. And I remember one night, we actually bought my cousin this Darth Vader helmet that I was just talking about. And my dad, or I don't know if it was my dad put it on or my uncle put it on and said, Luke, I am your father. And I remember my dad, like, actually sitting me down after and being like, that's not the real line of that movie. And everyone thinks it is. He really was, and he had seen these movies like so many times, and he knew, and he never fell for it. But the thing is like, it's such a huge, like, it had such a huge, like, right after, like, immediately after Star Wars came out, they immediately started quoting it wrong, and the reason why is because they needed to give it context. They needed to give that quote.
That makes sense.
Context.
You don't want a bunch of pronouns. Like, what does that mean?
Exactly. So you can't just go around saying, "No, I am your father." Like, if someone hadn't seen the movie or had seen it but didn't really like absorb all of it, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. So you had to add Luke, because everyone knew that Luke Skywalker was from Star Wars.
Yeah.
So that's why it was such a huge line. And so it's like, you can take old Star Wars toys that talk, and you press the little button, and it says, Luke, I am your father, and it's wrong. But it's to give it context. So yeah. It's interesting, but a lot of these theories can be explained that way. But they can also be explained away by the science of I had the word, it was right in my head. Suggestion. The science of suggestion. So, a lot of the other ones are like, how do you spell Fruit Loops? What color was Tony the Tiger's from Frosted the Flakes' nose? Like, things like that, where, like, if you just think about it, like, I don't know, like, it could have been spelled wrong.
Fruit Loops? How is there another way of spelling Fruit Loops? It's the word fruit and then the word loops.
But I think Fruit Loops, I can't remember that one exactly, but a lot of the way that these websites present to you the information, they show you the wrong way first, and then you're like, oh yeah, I remember it like that. So the way that your mind works, it doesn't want to make you sound stupid, so it's always trying to fill in the blanks that it doesn't remember. It's always doing this. So when you can't remember that blank, it is going to fill it in. So if it looks somewhat like how you remember it, your brain's going to be like, yeah, that looks exactly like how I remember it.
Now I'm doubting myself. Did they spell fruit F-R-O-O-T? I thought it was just the normal spelling of fruit, but I could be wrong.
I'm looking it up right now. No, it's F-R-O-O-T.
It
is.
Mind blown. I didn't realize that.
So see, like, it's the power, it's the art of suggestion, really, is how you can explain the Mandela Effect. But the way people like to explain it is, well, in another universe, they spelled it F-R-U-I-T, and you're actually from that universe. You're not from the universe that you're sitting in right now. But you don't know it. You don't remember when you crossed over.
That sounds hilariously paranoid.
Oh, I know. I love it. Like I said, I don't believe in the Mandela Effect. But I love thinking about parallel universes, and the Mandela Effect is really fun to think about and to ask these questions, and how do you remember it, you know? And there's, like, so many quizzes, like, on Facebook and online and everything that you can take to see which universe you're in, if you're in the right one or not.
I mean, I find the power of suggestion really cool and funny. I remember once at the university that we both went to, there was a place that buses stopped right in front of the university.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in Canada, where it is very cold, and most people wait inside.
Yeah.
And one day, on a particularly cold day, everyone was waiting inside. And I looked at the time, and I was like, oh, bus is probably going to be coming in a few minutes. I should head out so that I can be one of the first people to board. I can get a seat. I walk out the doors, and there's easily almost 100 people waiting inside the building. I walk out the doors. A few people see me walking out. They follow. A few more people follow those people. The entire building empties.
Exactly.
Everyone followed me out, and that's mass suggestion. They all assumed that bus was there. There was no bus. Half of them went back inside after they waited a couple minutes and were like, why am I here?
Well, exactly, and that's exactly how this Mandela Effect works, and, you know, being able to explain it away, you can't do that with a lot of theories, so that's another reason why I like it. It's just a fun little thing, and I believe about a year and a half ago is when it really exploded all over the internet. I remember seeing things on Facebook about it all the time, and people like YouTubers were talking about it all the time, and I was like, yeah, it's cool. Do I believe it? No. No, but it's fun, and I enjoyed it, and I took the quizzes, I'm not even gonna lie. I mean, sometimes I was in the right universe, and sometimes I wasn't, so... But, you know, after a while you started to just learn what the right way was for each of the different theories.
This theory, that they postulate that there is, like, some number of universes that you can determine based on these kind of silly questions that a lot of people get wrong.
I mean, all it is that it says, well, you used to live in this universe, but two universes collided, and now you live in this universe, and your other self lives in the other one. That's kind of...
So now whenever I get a math question wrong, I can be like, oh, wait, no. My way of solving it was correct in some other universe. But then I got into this one. Now I know how to explain all my failures.
Exactly.
I can just be like, no. My logic was right somewhere else.
So,
how do you know?
Interestingly enough, I actually remember when the Mandela Effect first started, people were trying to explain it away like the Matrix. In a sense. And like that it was like people specifically going back in time and changing these small little things. Like Berenstain Bears, on purpose.
Just to screw with people.
Or for some sort of like, maybe there was a reason that we just don't know and it seems small. But that was how they're first explaining it. I actually remember the transition... from, like, the Matrix kind of a theory into the parallel universe. And I actually kind of got on the bandwagon when they said parallel universes, because I'm like, the Matrix one just sounded dumb. Or it was like, there was a movie called, The Adjustment Bureau, which was kind of like a rom-com, but also, like, had this, like, time travel... not even parallel universe, but it, like, was these people who could, like, go and, like, they could switch things to put you on the right track for things. That was kind of how they explained the Mandela Effect.
That one had more to do with prediction, though, I'm guessing. I've never seen...
Yeah, rather than going back in time or anything, or... Yeah.
Your Matrix thing, that makes me think, I've seen the Matrix, but I think I may have seen one episode of this old show from the 90s called Sliders, which might be related. It had to do with these, I don't know, this group of people who were lost in like a bunch of parallel universes. They were trying to find their way back to the original Earth, and they were traveling around. Everything was super kooky and weird, and they were trying to be like, okay, develop some sort of test to be like, am I in the right universe? And at some point they arrive in one, and they're like, I remember this gate used to squeak. It wasn't properly oiled. And they see it, oh no, it doesn't squeak anymore. We must be in the wrong universe. And they left. Somebody had just applied oil to it. But it's just kind of...
Sounds like Inception.
Yeah, but I mean, like a person who is trying to find the correct universe or leave markers to identify universes which are incorrect, they might be like, I'm going to change the spelling of Berenstain Bears.
Yeah, no, I can see it.
This is a way of identifying this wrong universe. Let's move on, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with those kind of movies because I usually find plot holes. Because I find these things so interesting that I've done a little more research and a little more reading into it than the average person. So I struggle with those.
Average peasant.
Peasant. Oh, that's mean. But yeah, like I don't know. I struggle with movies like that because I'm sitting there like, well, I mean, it makes kind of sense. And I mean, if you really want to open your mind in maybe a different universe, it would make more sense, right? So it's, I guess I shouldn't be so close-minded.
No, I mean, it's not a matter of being closed-minded. It's just a matter of, in the pursuit of entertainment, are you willing to suspend disbelief? I usually am. I mean, Inception is full of like a billion plot holes, but I still find it entertaining.
You know
I don't
what?
care.
When I watched, Inception twice when it was in theaters, and like I was fairly young when it came out, so I honestly I don't feel like I fully understood it to the extent of what I should have understood, and it wasn't when I was on this kind of like bandwagon of researching and reading into these things and stuff. So I need to rewatch it now that I'm older and I really understand a lot more, because I feel like I would have, and maybe that's why I didn't get it, because a lot of the times I have rewatched movies that I didn't get before, and then later on I'm like, okay, I didn't get it because there's this huge gaping plot hole that I'm kind of like, what the fuck, that doesn't make sense.
I mean, my vague recollection of Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio had once attempted Inception or something. He went into some deeper level of a dream, and his wife went crazy, forgot that she was in a dream, killed herself in real life, and now
but we don't know if it was real life.
Yeah, I guess we don't know.
You never know if it's real life.
But even ignoring that, she somehow manifests herself in his forays into dreams and does crazy things, tries to kill him. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really remember
she's a real hazard throughout the movie. And yet, these, I don't know, important people decide, we're going to recruit this guy who's going to bring this crazy woman into our mission, who's a real potential hazard that's going to screw everything up. Like, why did they do that? Why didn't they pick someone who didn't have this strange history? I feel
it's a movie, Ben.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I mean, I was willing to ignore that. I was like, whatever. It's cool. They probably saw Leonardo DiCaprio in some other movie and were like, yeah, that's who I want on my team. He seems like a really solid guy.
Okay, so I think we're pretty much at the time where we can wrap it up.
Yeah, seems fair. Once we start moving on to Leo DiCaprio, I think we're done with the multiverse.
Yeah, I know you don't like him. Yeah, so just to mention again, we do have our references in the description. What else to say? I just want to thank you guys for listening through the whole podcast. If you made it this far, that's awesome. Listening to our ramblings and whatnot.
I hope I didn't bore you guys too much. It was fun for me.
It was fun for me too. And you know what? I really want to know what everyone else thinks about multiverses. Do you have any other theories that are completely different from these ones that we talked about? Do you have any kind of interesting ideas or interesting questions that could lead to deeper thinking? Let us know. Leave them in the comments. We want to read them, and maybe we'll discuss them on our next podcast, or just amongst ourselves, or we'll respond to you. I really want to see some interaction. It's fun to think about these things, and it's even more fun when you get to see someone else's perspective. So go ahead and leave a comment. I will be reading them for sure. Subscribe or follow if you want to see more of our content. That would be great. And we will see you next week for sure.
Looking forward to our discussion in the comments.
Yes, me too.